Some of you will already know Apple held their WWDC event last week. We had iOS 18 unveiled with changes to dark mode of the control center and some other things. watchOS, iPadOS, and even visionOS had some updates too. The AI features were no doubt the main focus of the event, with integrations into so many apps we use every single day. I'm actually not here to talk about any of those features though. If you're an old Mac lover like me, or just have an older Mac you don't want to replace yet, this page will have been the most important to you. macOS Sequoia, and the devices for which it has native support. As you can see, the iMac Pro from 2017 is entering its 7th year of support, which is among the best we've seen from Apple. The Mac Pro and iMacs from 2019 or later get support, and MacBook Pros from 2018 onwards do too. Somewhat perplexingly, only MacBook Airs from 2020 and later are going to be able to run Sequoia. It's horrible to think that once your Mac has been deemed too old to run the latest version, its days are numbered, and Apple are entirely in control of when you're forced to buy another computer. Well, actually, are they? First up, unlike my 52 million year old Nightia Eocena, Macs running older OSs are not fossils. In fact, security updates are given to all versions of macOS for another couple of years after the next one releases. For example, macOS Monterey, released in 2021, is still receiving security updates, making it technically an up-to-date operating system. Generally speaking though, you won't be particularly vulnerable to attack if you want to use something like macOS Catalina from 2019 though. Just run an up-to-date browser like Chrome or Firefox when browsing the web. You're not even losing too many features, let's be honest. Things like AirPlay, handoff, dark mode, and so much more were around in the days of Catalina. What you might lose by running an older OS is app support. But listen, if you take one thing from my video, make it this. You can update your older unsupported Mac to the latest version of macOS even if Apple don't have it on their native support list. Patch tools have existed for years, enabling you to bring an older Mac, let's say the 2012 MacBook Pro, to a new version of macOS, surprisingly easily. My 2012 MacBook Pro ran Ventura just fine until I sold it, and even better, my Mac Pro 5.1 from 2010, which I use every day, has been patched to macOS Monterey. Monterey is still receiving security updates, remember, so my 14-year-old Mac is up to date. If you have a Mac from before 2012, I'd suggest using DOSDude1's tool for patching macOS Catalina onto it. Catalina is pretty usable and shouldn't slow down your Mac particularly. 2012 and newer Macs should be fine with the OpenCore Legacy patcher, which you can use to install macOS up to Sonoma and likely Sequoia soon enough. I'll go over how to install these later on in the video, but first, how does running unsupported versions of macOS with patch tools affect the performance of your Mac? Well, my Mac Pro 5.1 has 6 processor cores and 48GB of RAM. Most of the hardware inside is from 2010, but it honestly runs macOS Monterey without any major hitches. My 2012 MacBook Pro ran Ventura absolutely fine, almost as though it were the operating system it came boxed with. My 2010 MacBook Pro was only supported natively until macOS High Sierra from 2017, but with DOSDude's Catalina patcher I can run macOS Catalina from 2019 just fine. You see the pattern emerging here. Apple have invariably been taking macOS support away from very usable computers far sooner than they perhaps should. The 2015 MacBook Pro's hardware, for example, is perfectly adequate to run macOS Sonoma as an operating system. Its processor is not far off the 2018 MacBook Pros in performance. Not to mention, the physical features of the two are almost identical. The 2018 MacBook Pro has had support beyond Sonoma though, with the 2015 dropped at Monterey from 2021. So if hardware isn't a major issue, why do Apple take the support away so quickly sometimes? Well, as is the case with many such questions involving the company, money is the main answer. Apple make a fair bit of profit off your initial Mac purchase. As we well know, the most expensive Macs can go for thousands. macOS updates have been offered for free since Mavericks in 2013, so after a few years of free updates, it makes sense that Apple would really like you to buy a new computer. They can essentially force your hand by discontinuing the software support for your machine, so from a business point of view, why wouldn't they? This is a problem rooted in many, if not all, big tech companies, and broadly in all publicly trading companies actually. Investors buy into the idea of Apple growing as a company, so they put money into the company by buying shares, which they are told by Apple will rise in value every single quarter. Although Apple make a significant portion of their profits on services these days, product sales are still where most of their money comes in from. I'm not going to get super political here. Competition does drive change, of course, but it's atrocious that companies like Apple, Samsung, and so many more are just pushing to sell more and more products with very little emphasis on making these things last longer. So, in some ways, this video is a bit of a call to action. As individuals, we can't change much, but if everyone used patch tools to make their computer last 10 years instead of 5, not only would Apple sell far fewer Macs, but only half the e-waste would be generated on Apple's laptops. That's surely a step in the right direction. So there you have it. If you're always checking Apple's site for your computer's compatibility with the latest version of Mac OS, just stop worrying about it. If your Mac is powerful enough to get you through tasks using the apps you need, then running a new enough Mac OS version is not going to be an issue. Some would claim computer technology has peaked a bit through the 2020s, although I don't entirely agree with that statement. You wouldn't be missing many features by not running Mac OS Sequoia from the day it comes out. So how does one patch a Mac to run a newer OS? Well, you just need a 16GB or larger USB drive and access to the internet to download some fairly large files. Most Intel Macs can run the Catalina patcher, and OpenCore Legacy patcher for the latest Mac OS version should work with almost every post-2010 Mac. DOSDude1 has an amazing guide for his Mac OS Catalina patcher, which I'll link down in the description. I'll also link Greg Gantt's guide for the OpenCore Legacy patcher tool, which I believe is among the best. You do need to be a fairly competent computer user to perform these patches, but if you've understood most of the concepts I've brought up today, you really shouldn't have any issues. Alright, so there were obviously a couple of really big things at WWDC last week, but it's better I leave the full recaps to those who do them best. There are thousands of tech channels going over the newly announced things, so I'd recommend you look elsewhere if you're interested in that. As far as macOS goes, I don't think Sequoia is a particularly huge jump. Intel users, enjoy a year's more support. We'll see if you're on for another year this time next year. If you're interested in talking about Macs and macOS, the Discord server is busier by the day and we talk about all sorts. Link to join in the description. Thank you very much for watching. Subscribe if you want to see more of the same, and I'll see you next week. The biggest thanks of today by far goes to my members on Patreon. Thank you for all the support.